This is Alicia Hen from Biospherics, and in today's unit of our Cytocentric Academy training program, we are talking all about the gloves. Now, there are generally 3 layers of protection that go between you and what you're working with when you're working in the ex vivo. You have an underglove on your hands, you have the system glove, which is integrated right into the Ex Vivo System sleeve. And then a lot of people like to add an over glove that they send in with their process items and put over the gloves inside the Ex Vivo System as well. So you can have 3 layers on your hands between you and what you're working with. The underglove can be a typical laboratory glove or a sterile surgical glove or any type of glove that you normally use in your process. Nitrile or neoprene or latex, although I often discourage people from using latex. I know that I personally, after years and years of using latex in research labs, have become quite allergic to it. So yeah, the more we can get rid of latex in the labs, the less risk of that there is to your personnel. But the underglove is disposable. It's for your personal protection. It can get sweaty, so particularly if you're working in a 37-degree processing chamber for a long period of time. If you're not in a GMP environment, if you're working in a research laboratory, some people will add a cotton glove, a cotton underglove to this. But if you're working in a clean room, you're not going to want to introduce the particles that come with a cotton glove into that room. So just stick with the other types of gloves. You can change these gloves whenever you need to. We'll tend to change them only if we're, pulling our hands out of the sleeves for other reasons, whether we're, done with the process or we're moving to other chambers or, whatever reasons. But you can change this whenever you need to. The system gloves are sealed to the system sleeves, and these gloves really are integral to the whole ex vivo system in providing that barrier between the processing air and the room air, and it protects both the process and the personnel. So you can change these gloves without compromising chamber integrity, and there are videos on this in the maintenance training unit that you should review. And we'll practice this in our live session as well, because changing gloves is going to be a routine thing for you. There are different types of gloves that you can install on the Ex Vivo System cuffs. What comes installed are called Nitrizol gloves. And that's a brand name. It's a heavier dishwashing type glove, but you can also put a surgical glove on there if you want, and a lot of our users will do this, and this will be lighter and thinner and more flexible and have better tactility. But there are actually pluses and minuses to using both types that we're about to go over. The surgical gloves, they'll form better to your hand. They're stretchier. They come in a variety of sizes. However, the downside of surgical gloves is they're harder to overglove and underglove. They tend to stick and stretch rather than sliding over your underglove when you're trying to put them on. And the same thing when you're trying to overglove inside the system. It's harder to get them. You have to work a little to get all those layers of the stretchy, sticky gloves over each other. They are also less durable, so that means you have to change them more often if you're using them as a system glove, at least once or twice a month. They're also less resistant to disinfectants and heat. And we saw this in particular when we did some tests where we cut the fingers off of gloves, both the heavier nitrazole glove and surgical gloves, and stretched them over 15 mil conical tubes. We then put 1.5 mils of disinfectant, or we stuffed a wipe, if we only had the wipe form of a particular disinfectant, into the finger and sealed them up. And we put them at either 37 degrees or at room temperature to simulate the different temperatures that you have inside the Xvivo system. And then we looked for any loss of material integrity, whether it was a color change in the glove or sticking to the conical tube, or actual liquid leaking through the finger into the bottom of the tube. We found that the nitrazole were far more resistant to the disinfectants and to heat than a neoprene surgical glove, and these are the brands that we actually used for this test, so you can see what we used. We found that the fastest degradation, particularly in the surgical gloves, came when we used Spore Cleanse and we exposed those gloves to 37 degrees. Those gloves only lasted about 4 days under those conditions. We had liquid leaking right through by then. Alcohols came in next a few days later, leaking through the material when they were put at 37 degrees. We had little or no degradation when using Tex-Q, which is a quaternary ammonium that we like a lot for using with the Xvivo system, or Virkon S, or Clean Side, which is an acid-based, citric acid-based disinfectant. So how quickly the gloves need to be changed may depend upon how frequently you're using more harsh disinfectants like Spore Cleanse. The nitrazole gloves are definitely more resistant to breakdown due to disinfectants, due to heat, due to time, due to abrasion. You only have to change them every 6 months, or of course as you need to. And they're a lot easier to slide undergloved hands into, and they're easier, I think, to overglove inside the system as well. You can order these nitrazole gloves from us, or you can order them from a lab supply place. It doesn't have to be from us. To lengthen glove life, number one, you could use the more durable types of gloves, like the nitrazole gloves. You could limit the frequency of sporicidal treatments with Spore Cleanse. And if you keep the gloves off those warmed floors, you can help reduce the degradation rate as well. You should check the system gloves daily for any degradation. You should check, put your hand in, turn it around, look at all the fingers, touch your fingers together, tell if you can feel if there's any tackiness or stickiness or discoloration. And you should look for any cuts or pinholes, especially near the fingertips if you're using a lot of sharps in your process. Remember that sharps are a risk to gloves and therefore to chamber integrity. So you want to try to limit the use of sharps in your process if at all possible. We had one customer come in during a feasibility study that the very first day they're moving all their packaging in and they're cutting package open, and they cut right across the package and right across the glove finger too as well, cut it right off. So luckily their finger wasn't hurt, but just be aware, keep the scissors out of there. If you can do without scissors, do without them. And be aware using needles or scalpels or other sharps that you need to be more careful with your gloves, or use a cut resistant glove in there. You want to take the glove and pull it to the side and look at the edges of the glove where it's stretched most thinly around the cuff. That's where you're going to see cracks appear over time. So when you're doing your daily check, make sure to pull the glove to the side and check around the cuff for any daylight coming through there. If you do find any damage, here is a severely damaged glove. This one was on a chamber that had not been used for a long time. You can see that there's cracks all around the cuff of this particular glove, because that's where it's the most stressed, is where it's stretched around that cuff. And if you do find any damage, of course you want to change that glove immediately, but you're going to have to disinfect that whole chamber before doing any open cell processing in that chamber. To reduce the strain on gloves around the cuffs, it helps not to use very, very small gloves on the glove cuffs. We have had people that have very small hands that wanted to put super small surgical gloves on the cuffs, and what they found is they got cracking around that cuff very quickly. So instead, what you might want to do is use a medium-sized glove on the cuff and then over glove inside the system with your extra small glove in order to form it better to your hand. So let's talk about over gloves. A lot of people like to take a sterile over glove inside the Xvivo system. They're easy to disinfect the outside of the wrap for that and bring it inside. Of course, when you do that, you're bringing paper into the system if it's wrapped like this in paper. So be aware that you're going to need to check your system particle levels for increases in particles when you're unwrapping those, and not to do that when you've got open steps in your process. A sterile over glove, particularly the surgical sterile glove, is particularly good for reducing the risk of cross-contamination between different samples if you need to work with multiple samples or different processes. So if you do use these, I strongly encourage you to use an over glove and to change those in between processes. Overgloving the heavier nitrazole glove with a stretchy surgical glove improves both the tactility and the fit of the more durable glove. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. You get the durability and the reduced frequency of the glove changes of the heavier nitrazole glove, and the tactility and of the surgical glove that you put over top of it. So I encourage you to try all the different combinations of more durable glove with the more tactile surgical glove for your own people and your own process, because everyone's hand anatomy is a little different, and there may be ways you can get a really excellent fit of these gloves for every member on your team using different combinations. Now, when you install a glove with a very strong right-left orientation on there, there is a number of different ways that you can install them on the system sleeves. If you have a 57-inch processing chamber, you'll have 4 sleeves on there. And if you have 2 people working together side by side, it makes sense to put those on left, right. So each person has a pair that are facing each other. But if you've got one person working in that 57-inch chamber, you might consider setting it up like we show in the bottom diagram there, where the middle 2 sleeves are facing each other, and then on the left-hand side you have a right-hand glove that can reach into the left-hand buffer more easily because our elbows and all our joints just bend that way naturally. And likewise, you can put the right-hand glove on, the left-hand glove on the far right-hand sleeve for bending your arm into the chamber on the right-hand side. Likewise, if you have a process where you have one person reaching in to do one step, whether it's to stabilize a filter or to hold something or to pass things to you, you might want to have the appropriate glove for that person on the sleeve where they're going to be reaching in. It really depends on your process. Now you have this glove cuff, which is something you're not used to having or using before. And I'm going to encourage you here to grab onto that glove cuff and use it to pull the glove onto or off of your hand, because the alternative, which is trying to stretch your hand all the way to the extreme end of the sleeve to try to get your hand into the glove, or alternatively trying to back all the way up and pull your hands out without holding onto that cuff, they're just more awkward. I did have one customer that liked to take a big step back and just yanked both hands out of the sleeves, and this would not only is kind of bad because you're yanking on the cuffs and the gloves, but it left everything turned all the way inside out and inverted. So the next person that came to that process chamber would have to turn the glove and all the fingers right side back out again in order to get their hands into the chamber, and you don't want to have to do that. So use that cuff as help for you to get your hands in and out of the gloves. Signs you need to replace the inner cuff ring. Now the very inner cuff ring, this is the one that you put the gloves on when you're doing a glove change. Over years of use, that cuff ring can wear out, and so it will get a little loose in the outer cuff ring that's on the sleeve. So every once in a while, you want to try to take that cuff ring and see if you can rotate it in place on the inside the outer cuff ring. If you can rotate that at all, then you need to give us a shout, and we will send you some replacement cuff rings and gaskets because we want to make sure that seal stays tight. Also, be aware when you do glove changes, there are two little screws, and you can see them in this photo. There's two little screws that are on that inner cuff ring, and they are easy to break off if you really press down on that hard with the screwdriver when you're replacing gloves. We'll go over this when we do the glove changes. You don't want to press right down on that screw real hard, or you can snap that off, in which case you'll have to replace that inner cuff ring. And if you need new cuffs, please give us a shout. Service is happy to help with that, and we can send out some new ones to you. Thank you, and I'll stop here. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions.